Hello, my name is Dan Johnson and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be doing my prediction video and the preview video, what we know so far as they used to be called, for the next episode and beyond of Flux. So last year I did this series and I called it What We Know So Far, and I basically talked about plot threads and where I think that things were going and what might happen next week based off basically just promo images and my imagination. With this one, I realised that I wanted to do the same, but because it's a multi-part episode, I could do it a lot better and kind of write the episode as it develops. It's a little bit like when you're at school and the teachers ask you to they give you half a story and then you have to write what happens next. I'm kind of doing that with Doctor Who episodes. And luckily for me, even though episode 1 was quite muddled and kind of was all over the place, they set up a lot of little things that they're going to pick up on in the future. So I had quite a lot of material. First, let's talk about Claire. Now, she was the woman that got abducted by the Weeping Angels, and I think that what we're seeing here is the prequel to the Weeping Angel episode that we'll later get, God knows when. And with this, I think that she's in a time loop. I think that she's looping round, meeting the Doctor as she does in episode 1, gets kidnapped, goes back, and then lives out her life again, so she returns to that point, if that makes sense. And they are living off that time loop. The Weeping Angels, and that's sort of bringing them back so that by the time that you reach their episode, they've actually got quite a lot of power because they've been able to feed off that continuous energy. So what I think is happening here is that she's been sent back a certain amount of time and she'll be playing a bigger part in the Weeping Angel episode. Not quite sure what. Maybe she can make like a supporting character role. She'll just sort of be there as a victim of the Weeping Angels. And by coincidence, she's met the Doctor before. It is right that she's gone back something like 300 years, so maybe she's in like the 1800s, and relating the Weeping Angel plot to that Victorian plot, but that is mostly just speculation. The only real connection that I have here is that two people are acting a bit irrationally. You know, she's talking to herself as she's walking home, but she's talking to herself in third person. And then this guy is building tunnels because he seems to have had some kind of vision. And because of that vision, he feels possessed almost to do that. So maybe that's the link there, but I'm not sure. And speaking of that 300 years in the past, let's talk about that bit on its own now. I think two things for this one. This is the reason that Liverpool is going to be playing such a big part in the story. They keep, I don't know if you noticed, but like there's lots of images of the football club and stuff like that within the episode, and I think it might be like an agreement between the BBC and Liverpool to allow them to film there. Maybe they got some like cheaper rates or something because of the advertising that they're giving Liverpool. In the same way that Cardiff now gets a lot of visitors because of Doctor Who, maybe Liverpool had the same sort of deal. And because of that, I think that the going back in time thing with the tunnels and that bloke building them in defense of what I presume is the Flux, but that is also probably the way that they're linking Liverpool back. So I imagine that they will be revisiting Liverpool for some reason because of these tunnels when it becomes to their corresponding episode. You know, there's images of them filming, and Dan and Yaz are both dressed up in attire suiting the time. So I think that they're going to have to be coming back to Liverpool, but in the past, in order to investigate these tunnels and investigate whatever force has made that man build them. I did write down that this could be a Matrix clip, in the same way that Brendan was like a Northern Irish town or village. Tecteun disguised those clips so that no one could see them apart from the Doctor when she learned what they meant, I think. So because of that, I think it'd be interesting to see that the Division did the same thing by disguising clips in the Matrix, because they have access to the Matrix, as they were able to play around with the Matrix when the Master was there, because he could not see certain bits of footage because they were blocked, basically, or deleted. So what if the Division used their actual messages and just disguised them with coatings of the past in order to have them go through unnoticed? So maybe the clue to defeating, maybe the Flux and maybe Swarm, I imagine more Swarm, is going to be within that 1800s setting. And maybe instead of going back in time, they actually entered the Matrix. But I mean, that's the chances of that are very low. So let's talk about Swarm initially. I think that Swarm is the Voldemort of the Division. I think that he's the bad guy in that time period, and now that he's been reborn, he can come back and fight the Doctor, who is his arch nemesis. Maybe even something to maybe a relation within his family, because if he can regenerate, he's clearly shown to be able to regenerate, and when he says rebirth, with that, I wonder whether there's a connection there between the Doctor's regeneration and the regeneration of Swarm. There was a theory just before the episode started that Swarm was actually the Master, and after the Timeless Children, there was nothing really left of the Master, so that's the kind of husk that he's in. I like the idea that Swarm has regenerated so many times that his body's broken by it, and that he's now this horrible beast. He started off like the Doctor, and now he's transformed and just with each regeneration become more hideous, and has worse dress sense than before. But with this, it would mean that the Doctor's going to end up as some horrible husky thing at some point, but I'm not a big fan of that. But we'll have to see. I imagine Chibnall is brave enough to do it. And then, of course, there's the question of Diane and what she has to do with all of this. Now, I don't think that she's like a way for them to get at the new companion, well, I mean, he's only just been introduced. There's no way that they know about that connection, and therefore they've chosen that she'd be the best person to kidnap. I think that she is actually another member of the family. I think that there is the brother, the sister, and then I think the mother. And I think the mother is the good one, the good side of the family. I think she's the one that has kind of lost control of her children, and that is why she's not in Antarctica. She's laying low in Liverpool. And I think the plan would be for her that she would, I suppose, activate if the time came and go to these tunnels, and there'd be something there for her to do to stop her son and Flux returning. Something I am pretty sure on is that Swarm is the creator of the Flux. I think that it's not a coincidence that he's also coming to life as the Flux is beginning. He also has the same powers as the Flux, if you've noticed. The effect for him killing people is the same as it is for the Flux destroying planets. So maybe the Flux is like another part of his entity, and we're not quite sure how his regeneration works, but maybe there's a kind of off branch, and that's like the mothership, and this is just the vessel he uses. I like that idea. And I don't think it has any real bearing on the story, but I wonder whether his sister was put into some sort of witness protection, in the same way that Ruth was. But Ruth did it to herself, but the Division would have put his sister into her own witness protection. And so then she was forced to be human with a guardian. In this case, it was her husband, and Ruth had Lee. So Ruth and the sister are very much alike. And so a couple of little loose ends are the Sontarans' ability to time travel. And my reason behind how they're going to get around this issue, so that the Sontarans are in the Crimean War next week, is the Flux has given them the ability. They seem quite happy about the fact this Flux thing is happening and using it as a way to invade. And I think that what the Sontarans are trying to do is invade time, because famously Sontarans don't have the ability to use time travel. So with that, the Sontarans can then invade different pasts and fight in as many wars as they like throughout time. As the Flux is ripping through it all and destroying it, they can use it as a vessel, which would mean that the Flux is also a time entity. Because and I'm pretty sure it is, because the Doctor sonics it towards the end of the episode and says that it's breaking every rule of time and space, which would mean that it is also damaging time somehow. that would also lead to the decay of the TARDIS if time is breaking apart. That's an interesting connection there. And then to wrap up, we have my predictions for how they're going to get out of their cliffhanger ending. And first, I think that they're going to be rescued by Vinder. Now, because of the promo images, that probably won't be happening. He's probably going to get rescued by the Swarm and by the Flux, I guess. And he's going to be taken to this place where we're going to learn about these creatures. I don't know why they've decided to take him, but I imagine he's something to do with the division, so they might know him from the past. But we will have to see. Maybe like he's been resorted to some kind of terrible job of just observing this location that no one's ever going to see him again because of something that he's done in the past. You know, a kind of bad guy that wasn't as bad as they thought he was, and was convicted. But punishment was to basically sit in this observation tower and watch the world go by, where nothing happened until one day it did. But as for the Doctor and co, I think that Dan is going to be rescued by Carvanista. He's got to save his human, so somehow he will get his human off that ship. But as for the other two, I'm not quite sure whether he'll have so much of a connection to them to save them. I think that the Sontarans and the Doctor and Yaz are going to be teleported by the Flux accidentally back to the Crimean War. I'm not quite sure why. If it's destroying time, maybe it's just manipulating it, and that's why you can be teleported back in time. That's how I'm presuming they get there, because I don't think the TARDIS is in a good enough state to actually get them there and back. And that would also explain why the Doctor's running towards the TARDIS, because the TARDIS has arrived just later. Meaning that they are basically stranded in the Crimean War fighting Sontarans who are continuing their invasion. And so Dan is on this ship with Carvanista, and then Dan goes back to Earth. I presume that the lifelong structure of this thing was not to keep them in those cages, was to bring them back to Earth, and this sort of shield that they've built works as some kind of barricade to protect them and protect Earth, and which will explain why they've actually surrounded Earth instead of, you know, dicking around making their own house up there. And Dan somehow teleports himself back down and finds that there are Sontarans living on Earth, and he's the only human left, so that's why he's running through the street getting shot at. So the Sontarans have then basically built ships, built their own operation on Earth, and I'm not quite sure what that will lead to. Part of me thinks the Sontarans are going to get defeated after this episode, being the War of the Sontarans. I think that the hour will suffice to build the conflict, to end the conflict, and then they can focus on things like Weeping Angels. I'm imagining that they'll get like one episode each, if that makes sense. So, you know, the Ravagers will be an episode, the Swarm thing will be an episode, the Weeping Angels will be an episode, that kind of stuff, where they have one episode to focus on and then like a few to build the overall arc of the series, maybe. That's what I'm thinking. There were some interesting theories and predictions. Hopefully, Chibnall can meet or exceed my predictions. But until next time, thank you very much for watching. I hope you did enjoy this video, and I shall see you soon. Goodbye.